Welcome back. Advocates for Children of New York revealed a troubling reality for students in New York City. Over 146,000 students, around 1 in 8 enrolled in public schools, experienced homelessness during the 2023 to 24 school year. This includes those living in temporary housing or shelters, a situation that presents numerous challenges to academic success. Joining us to tell us more is the Education Partnerships of Project Lit at the Advocates for Children of New York, Marcia Flores. Marcia, thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Now, can you just give us a very quick overview of your organization and the work that you do?
Sure. Advocates for Children is a nonprofit education focused organization. We protect every child's right to learn, especially those in lower income housing.
Now, what factors have contributed to the rise in student homelessness in New York City over the past decade?
Our focus is on education, but what we know is that there's housing instability, lack of affordable housing, there's poverty that plagues these areas, in addition to, of course, domestic violence. These are some of the issues that have driven families to experience homelessness.
Now, how can being in temporary housing or shelter impact a student's ability to succeed academically?
I mean, it's completely tied to academic success in the sense that students living in shelter dropped out of school at almost triple the rate of the students that are in permanent and temporary or rather permanent housing. So what that means is that 67% of students experience chronic absenteeism, and what that means is that 1 of 10 days are missing, so that their consistency and their stability in the classroom is disrupted. So essentially, they're missing critical components to their educational learning.
Now, with that, what are some of the specific challenges homeless students face when it comes to school transportation, and how can this be addressed?
So, with school transportation, what happens is that 40% of families are placed in shelters in a borough where their school is not the school of origin. So, what this means is that, you might be living in the Bronx and then you could be placed in Queens. Could be an hour and a half away from where you normally are, which again spirals to leading into absences and school transfers, which again disrupts the student's stability to be in school and miss those key instructional milestones day to day. And if you're missing attendance, if you're not going in every day, then you're really missing that formulative moment that you're spending with your teachers and your students and your classmates and learning at the same pace as them. So you're really missing out on some of those educational milestones.
Now, can you tell me a little bit more about the foundation aid formula and how it may be outdated to, serving families who are facing homelessness today?
Right. So the foundation aid formula pretty much determines how much per pupil funding schools receive in Albany. So what we're really asking for is that they amount or allot specific weight for students in temporary housing. So right now, they don't have any weight allocated to students in temporary housing. And what we're asking the state to do is to make sure that they allocate those funds specifically for students in temporary housing so that they can address academic support, tutoring, family outreach, engagement, attendance improvement efforts, coordination with community groups to provide wraparound services, all these things tied together to make sure that students are really getting the attention that they need to go to school every single day.
Now, how can schools play a role in breaking the cycle of homelessness for students and their families?
I mean, this is such a key issue because young adults without a high school diploma are 4.5 times more likely to experience homelessness. So what does that mean? Like the school can really make an effort to connect with students, to make sure they're connected with academic supports, to make sure that they connect with parents so that they understand the credits that they've missed and how they can go about obtaining them. And this is like for older students, but again, for younger students that they obtain tutoring services and supports. So we want to make sure that we see those dropout rates decline by providing attention to parents and students at every single critical moment in their child's academic career.
Now, what is the impact of policies like the 60-day shelter limit on education of homeless students?
I mean, this has been completely a disaster from start to finish. And essentially, what happens is students miss school, they have school transfers. And what it again looks like is that you're comfortable, you're a student, you're connecting with your classmates, you're connecting with your school staff, and then you're moved somewhere else and you have to start all over again. Not only necessarily with the curriculum, but trying to make those connections that help really provide school stability for these families.
Now, what areas of New York are we seeing very high rates of student homelessness?
So, we're seeing concentrations in Manhattan, Bronx, Brooklyn. And again, these are places where there are high populations of poverty. We're seeing domestic violence. We're seeing, just a lack of affordable housing. So, when we in the Bronx are walking around, we're going on the bus, we're taking the train, one out of every six student is unhoused. It is unconscionable, and we really have to focus our efforts on maintaining school stability and achieving positive, successful educational outcomes for our families.
Now, I also want to talk about, some challenges within the school that could be affecting students experiencing homelessness, and that's staffing shortages. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Right. The city has experienced staffing shortages within this year. And again, that's something that they can specifically earmark time and attention to addressing because there's shortages on the central level that can improve strategy. There's also shortages on the school level that can really improve if, or rather, once that's addressed on the school level, we can make sure that students are identified, that they have the support academically, that they are tied to services. So all of these things have to work together in order for us to be able to focus on academic outcomes for our students.
Now, what steps can schools take to reduce chronic absenteeism among students in temporary housing?
So, one of the main ways is again making sure that they're aware of the students who are experiencing homelessness, but in addition to that, making sure that they receive academic support and tutoring, that they have family outreach and engagement. There's so many ways, again, to reach out to your families and to understand what they're going through and to really provide that support for them. But in addition to that, really coordinating with community groups to provide wraparound services. So, we what that looks like is maybe like a community school who is working in tandem with some of the local community organizations, and they provide services like tutoring, after school, different ways for parents to really maintain stability while they're focusing on their housing search or finding employment.
Now, I also want to talk about, of course, academics are very important for students, but they're also going through a lot mentally and emotionally. Can you talk about what that experience is like for a lot of young people, especially children?
Yes. So obviously, there is sometimes trauma associated with the moves and associated with the disruption to their life. Now, what we think the services could possibly address are issues like bullying, depression, things like that. But again, we think it's something where people have to be connected and tuned into the families in order to address their needs.
And I love that you mentioned bullying because we don't think about how maybe other kids are reacting. Maybe if they don't know exactly what's going on, they may notice that one student may be going through something or maybe they look a little different. How can we kind of educate very young people about something like homelessness and to kind of have that sensitivity towards another student?
I think, back to like the early education component, they start so basic and like treating others how you would treat them, right? So that need for connection, that need to understand that people's basic primary needs need to be met. And over here at AFC, we believe that education is one of those things. So it's important, again, not just to address the idea of finding the homes for the city to address finding homes for these people. Yes, absolutely. But in tandem, they should be knowing and understanding and addressing how important it is to focus on education as well.
What funding solutions are being proposed to help schools better serve homeless students?
So that foundation aid formula, which they're revising right now, that's really something that we're focusing on. We really want to call on the state to add weight for students in temporary housing. Like I said, if they have this addressed, they have that line item there, they can then really start creating strategies and focusing attention to this population.
Now, we briefly talked about, students in school and bullying, and in my mind, I was thinking about maybe high school students, middle school students, and maybe some in elementary school. But I'm curious to know,
Mhm.
how is this affecting very young children in their early development? So those that are in kindergarten, or maybe they're just reaching first grade.
Right. And for us, again, from the educational standpoint, we think about it in terms of their educational progress, right? When we see a student who might have 60, or when we know that 67% of students in shelter were chronically absent, we equate that to them missing school days. And then that could snowball into something wherein, like, their reading proficiency rates in the third to eighth grade in reality are 20 percentage points lower than students in permanent housing. So, what that means for us is that in the younger grades, they're learning all these critical decoding tools, they're learning critical foundational reading and examination and interpretation that they might be missing and can build upon later. So, if they don't have that and get that consistently, it really does become a problem later.
Now, I'm curious to know, I've learned just by knowing other people in school that
Mhm.
sometimes if a child is missing too many days, the way the school approaches it isn't automatically to think that maybe they're experiencing homelessness, and they think it's maybe more of child endangerment, or they kind of go through a different avenue. Has there been any updates to that, how teachers should address absenteeism with students?
Well, again, like, we know certain perspectives, like there are school communities, community schools rather, that really engage their community partners to understand their population and learn where they are and where they're at and meet their needs where they're at. So again, that involves learning where the student has any deficiencies academically and addressing those through tutoring, and again addressing things like structural problems like busing and making sure that we address busing delays that you might not think is a real thing, but it actually is. It takes up a lot of time, and it takes up a lot of coordination for parents. So that ends up being something that focuses the families and the community partners on getting children to school, getting them focused, getting them prepared.
Now, I also want to take this moment to highlight the parents because we talked about the children and the students a lot. What are some programs or just things out there just to assist parents while they're on this journey?
Mhm. I mean, we at Education, Advocates for Children, we definitely have our project, Project Lit, which is Learners in Temporary Housing, and we form attendance team meetings to discuss attendance of students that are in need of some attention. Again, addressing barriers that they might be facing to get to school. So that's one organization, ours, that we know that's working really well. But again, some local organizations focus on tutoring. There are some local organizations that focus on meeting families' food needs. There are other organizations that focus on meeting medical requirements. So these are all things that could be working in tandem if we understand, know where they are, and provide those connections to families.
Now, are there any successful models or programs in other cities or states that New York City could adopt to better address student homelessness?
I think the idea of working collaboratively with shelter partners and schools is a huge, huge way for schools to understand and know people who are working within shelters, so that when a student is missing or if a student hasn't been to school in a few days, they know who to contact and they have a variety of ways to reach the parent. Again, I'll just plug Project Lit from Advocates for Children. We're working on the ground all the time. We're talking to people in all the boroughs. We're really working to understand the need of families who are in this position right now.
And as we're talking about homelessness, I think it's important to kind of just discuss the stigma associated with it. How does the stigma of homelessness affect students' self esteem and relationships with peers and teachers?
Right. I think sometimes, we want to just, again, make sure that the student can be in their classroom, focus, learn, and be on par with the rest of their students. So I think part of that is, again, addressing their ability to get to school, their ability to have, you know, all the adequate needs that will get them to being able to focus.
Now, what can we do to kind of address the root of the problem? I think that these organizations are amazing, but there is a problem here that we're seeing in New York City with affordable housing. So, what goes into addressing the root of the problem?
I mean, unfortunately, like ours is mostly like education based, but for us, it ends up being really targeting academic support, tutoring, family outreach and engagement, improving attendance efforts. Like all of these things, if you focus on the education in tandem with housing, then you allow students are in school from 8 to 3. Parents are then able to address their employment and their housing needs. So those two things, those two areas, being able to find a home and being able to adequately educate your child, are happening at the same time. So I think, again, when we think about eliminating this problem, when we think about really actionable items to try and focus on eliminating this issue, it's really thinking that education is just as important and can help your parent find steady employment and housing.
Now, what do you hope to see for the future of this organization and its efforts?
I definitely, we work with some shelter partners in the Bronx. We work with shelter partners in Brooklyn as well. We appreciate and are open to anyone who's willing to contact us and provide families who might need help. We are definitely 100% able to work with anyone who is willing to move this issue forward. And we're always able to address the questions and concerns of families who are going through this right now.
And where can people go to learn more information and see more about the work that you're doing?
100%. You can reach us at advocatesforchildren.org. We also, have a telephone number that you can call. You can call our helpline, and that is open from Monday through Thursday, 8 to 4:30 a.m. or 8 to 4:30 p.m. Yes. Thank
Well,
you.
thank you so much for joining us. We truly appreciate you taking the time to speak with us. I know that here in the Bronx, this is something that's very important. So thank you so much for talking about this.
No, I appreciate you. Thank you so much, Kibin. Take care.
Bye.